Okay, well, thank you all for joining us. Appreciate everybody coming together so we can dig into some of the research that our fellow task force, Truth in Labeling Task Force members have asked us to gather. And we're pleased today to be able to bring a true industry expert to be able to present on some of the research that we were asked to gather and to be able to ask some questions. So with that, I'll do a quick round of introductions of the folks on the line, and then we can dig in. I'm Dylan DeThomas. I'm VP of External Affairs for the Recycling Partnership and Chair of the Truth in Labeling Task Force. And I'll pass the baton to my colleague, Dr. Anya Brandon.
Hi there, Dr. Anya Brandon. I'm the U.S. Plastics Policy Analyst at Ocean Conservancy and serving as Vice Chair of the Oregon Truth in Labeling Task Force. Over to you, Alex.
Thank you, Anya. I am Alex Bertolucci, Project Manager for the Truth in Labeling Task Force and staff at Oregon Department of Environmental Quality.
Thank you. And lastly, our speaker today, Kim Holmes. Kim?
Thank you. So Kim Holmes, I'm Principal Consultant for our sustainability. And really the work that we do is to help industry move towards voluntary sustainability goals and initiatives, and where there are regulatory requirements, helping them ensure that they are in compliance. So I have been tracking the work of the task force, which you guys have accomplished a lot of ground in just a short period of time. I really appreciate the focus and the line of inquiry on smart labeling. And I do have a client in this space, Digimark. And so I've really familiarized myself with kind of the whole realm of smart labeling technology over the past year. And I was trained as an anthropologist in college, and my first couple of jobs was in archaeology. And so I've really been fascinated by these things that are like technology evolutions that drive cultural change. And, you know, I think one of the big ones that people look at is like the printing press, how that changed access to information and really caused a cultural and societal leap. And I'm not suggesting that smart labeling will, you know, have quite the same impact, but I do really see it as having some potential, because it will serve as the link to the Internet of Things. And I think, you know, people have maybe heard of that, but what the Internet of Things is taking our physical products and using those to connect us to digital information. And then how we choose to use that information is up to us, because it is infinitely customizable. And, you know, the amount of information provided is almost limitless. And so I do think if we are intentional, there's a way that we can use smart labeling to help enable our circular economy goals. And so that's what we'll kind of drive through today, where we're at in terms of the different technologies available to us, how they're being used, and how specifically they can maybe be used to help accelerate recycling. All right. So what is smart labeling? We're going to cover smart labeling from two different perspectives, the consumer perspective and then the perspective of the recycling industry. So smart labeling, it can be accomplished in a number of different platforms: QR codes, image recognition, so artificial intelligence, digital watermarking, near field communication, NFC, which is what's used in our credit cards, just kind of tap and go, and then RFID tags, which have a bit more range on them. And so we've got an example up there of a QR code on a cereal box. Simply, you can, you know, use your smartphone. That is a technology that we would call native to our smartphones. It doesn't require like an app to be downloaded. Some of these other technologies do require a specific app to be downloaded and activated to kind of initiate that interface with the smart label. So kind of technology is in a couple of different stages in terms of how it's integrated into our smartphones. But it serves as a way that we can connect with the consumers for a couple of different reasons. Brands are using these to create new brand engagement opportunities. They can promote, you know, different environmental initiatives, corporate initiatives. They can gamify things, the consumer experience. They can offer additional sourcing, health, and nutritional information that maybe doesn't fit on pack. And when we're talking about on pack labeling, you know, it's it's premium real estate, right? What we can put on there. And there's a lot of things that are regulated to be on there. So there may be things that we want to communicate beyond what we can just fit into that tiny space and type font. We can provide recyclability information based on geolocation, and we'll dive into that. Enhancing the consumer experience, like I said, potentially gamifying, giving more information on a whole different variety of platforms. And we could even, some of them are even being used to educate on food storage, how to maximize the life of the product as a way to prevent food waste. So that's kind of another, I guess, way that we can address an environmental challenge using smart labels. And so kind of, as I mentioned at the offset, smart labels really are becoming the key driver for this Internet of Things concept. And we're already beginning to see retailers and brands beginning to adopt the use of smart labels. So Walmart has been using digital watermarking actually for their private brand labels. And so each of these where I've linked, you can kind of dive deeper into some information. So smart labels here, this will take you to, this is really an initiative driven by the Consumer Brands Association. So this is something that the brands very much as an industry are behind adopting, because the value propositions are many in terms of consumer engagement. So like I said, Walmart's got some digital watermarking. Unilever is participating in the smart label platform as well. And by recent count, there's over 80,000 products in the marketplace that include some type of smart labeling for the consumer to interact with. So consumers are still very much on the learning curve in terms of even understanding what these are. But they're learning the functionality, and we are, I think, really beginning to see some signals that we're driving towards just normalization, people understanding how to interact with these packages. And so some have branded it as a way to share all information that won't fit on the package, because as I mentioned, it really is, the amount of information you can provide is limitless and customizable all the time. So say for Earth Day, if they wanted to push a message, they could change that message. So they don't have to rely on kind of, a reprint of a package to change their message. Okay, so by providing the new and interactive way to present this information, as I mentioned, there's just this kind of limitless opportunity to customize. And when we talk about accessibility, I know that's a charge of this group is to look at accessibility and how we can improve labeling so that all people can participate, all different segments of the population can participate in recycling. This really could be an enabler for that. So just talking about language, taking language first, based on the language preferences of your smartphone, you could scan that product and get all the communication and information that you need based on your language preferences. So we can immediately kind of eliminate language barriers as we're talking about educating people. And then when we look at accessibility for other populations, the vision impaired, CVS actually has in place an RFID program called SpokenRx, where you can put your phone over your pill bottle that has this tag, and it will read you your instructions. You can get all sorts of other kind of side effect, drug interaction information. So it's universally accessible by folks. And then when we're talking about health and safety, packages have nutritional information listed, but sometimes if you have a food allergy, it may not be descriptive enough. So that's where smartphones or smart labels are also being used to alert people to allergens that may be hidden in some of the other listed ingredients. So there really is kind of a consumer safety aspect as well when we're talking about smart labels. So specifically, how can smart labels be used in recycling education and helping to accomplish the other goals of this group, right? That we are really providing educational messaging around what is recyclable and not recyclable. And so I mentioned this opportunity to interact with geolocation. And so that's one way, right? Not everyone wants to enable the geolocation. So the other way is you can have an opt-in based on your location service provider. So if you didn't want to use geolocation all the time for your phone, you could say, hey, I'm in Hillsborough, here's my service provider. And it would direct you to what's on the accepted list in that community. But in addition to that, letting you know kind of what's accepted where you're located, since we are looking as a state at deploying a hybrid model of both curbside collection and drop-off collection, we could get as granular as telling people how to recycle that item properly, whether it is in the curbside bin, whether it's drop-off location, and maybe even where that nearest drop-off location is. So it really enabling people to interact appropriately in this new and more dynamic system that we're looking to create for the state. And so what are the benefits using that for the consumer? People don't need to take that extra step anymore of checking their local government website for the accepted materials list. I don't know if we have any stats on how many people actually do that, but I certainly see that as a barrier to recycling right. We aren't relying on the consumer to determine the category of the product that they're looking at. So for example, if they have a fiber-based packaging item, and maybe that accepted list just list some high-level categories. We don't have to rely on the consumer to figure out like, okay, does this product fit into the pizza box category or the whatever category? We can get very specific about what should and should not be in the bin. Consumers can be instructed on the recyclability of specific design features. So we could also tell them, full shrink labels, remove that shrink label before you put it in. You got a cereal box, the liner goes to the store, the box goes in your curbside bin. We can get very specific about how we treat kind of each part of the package. And we can overcome any of the confusion that comes with the check locally label that's used by some labeling schemes like how to recycle. Again, that requires the consumer to take that extra step of figuring out what's on the accepted material list based on their location. And the RIC. The RIC gets to be the RIC, which is probably what people want it to be, right? Not a tool for consumer education or what it becomes, a point of consumer confusion. It simply gets to be a resin identification. And so this really gives the consumers a new method for determining recyclability. So as we like to say, kind of smart labeling helps remove the friction for people looking to recycle and recycle right. Okay, so that's smart labels from the perspective of the consumer. Smart labels can also have utility when it comes to the people in the recycle value chain. And not all smart labels have this functionality or can be used in this way, but certainly digital watermarks can, or any other type of mark that is repeating across the package. QR codes could do the same thing, but what are the odds that the QR code is going to lay perfectly right, after going through compaction and lay on that conveyor belt and be picked up and sensed? You really need, if you want a smart label, it needs to be integrated throughout the entire package to have utility at this stage of the recycle value chain. So that's what we'll focus on here. So when you are able to have a smart label carry on to that stage, it can, again, carry a lot of very valuable information for the recycling process. So you can get manufacturer and specific product level information that can be useful for EPR programs. We can tell the detection unit what's food grade versus non-food grade. So right now, a lot of the material that goes to the MRF, it gets downgraded inherently into non-food grade packaging because we just don't know the source. But if we know that the package was originally used for food contact and can divert them into a stream that will go to food contact, we can continue to put materials to the highest and best use, retain that value, and most importantly, meet some of the substantial post-consumer recycle content goals that brands have for food packaging. We could determine recyclable versus compostable. As multi-layer packaging continues to become more prominent in the marketplace, some are being optimized for recycling, some are not. That could be carried in the code as well. What's been optimized and could say go to the polyethylene stream or the polypropylene stream and be recycled with either other flexibles or even some rigid containers. Black trays, black rigid items that have carbon black. Right now, they are not detectable by the NIR units. Using digital watermarking, we can go ahead and detect that because we're not relying on an NIR signal to go back. Using the light of the detection units, it will pick up the code. And when we're talking about a code, we'll talk about this a little more on the next slide, but there are different types of codes that can be applied to a rigid package versus a flexible printed package. So it can work for both types of packaging. We can, you can use digital watermarking for dimensions, weight, CO2 footprint. And anyway, again, there's a lot of information that you can pack into the code that can be recorded by the units and enable more detailed segregation. So it's really a rich product level data that can be gathered on the brands. The PROs will benefit from it and help with compliance and reporting as well. Okay, so using the digital watermark as an example for the recycle value chain, kind of what is that? So it's a digital identifier or a code that kind of looks like a QR code. It doesn't look like a barcode. This is just for kind of a point of reference or example. But it is a modulated code that is repeated throughout the product. In the print product, it operates by taking just very slight modulation of the colors that, again, the human eye wouldn't see, but can be picked up by the camera. And so the consumers really aren't going to see it in the artwork of a package. And the package that's displayed here, that fairy dish detergent, is really ideal. It works great where you've got the majority of the package is printed. It doesn't require any special inks. Another client of mine is a company that has applied digital watermarking. It was very easy to work with their existing supply chain, modulate the artwork, and get the next run printed containing a digital watermark. So there's nothing that would, be residual that could affect the downstream when it's recycled. In plastics, in rigid plastics, it can be integrated into like a topological embossing. And so that can even serve as a signal to the consumer, like, hey, there's an embossing here. Like, let me scan that and see, like, this may have a digital watermark. The embossing may also help hide some of the imperfections that will come with use of recycled content. So there could be some utility there as well. That's kind of being explored in the Holy Grail project. And so again, because there's no additives or anything like that, it's fully compatible with other kind of circular economy goals. And this is how we turn things into the Internet of Things. And so I would say that code, from a use perspective, a consumer could use it to enable checkout. Like, you don't have to find the barcode. A machine could read it and it would say, I'm $2. When a consumer puts it on its phone, because it's a different tool for reading, it could have, I'm recyclable or not. When it goes through the MRF, again, because it's a different system reading it, that code will mean something else. So it's really a way to pack a lot of information for a lot of different users and platforms into one package. So this concept is being tested out in the Holy Grail 2.0 project. I know there was some requests for information on that from the work group. So this is part of a 3-year project that is being run by the European Brands Association. Their acronym is AIM. So Holy Grail itself is being funded by over 160 participants, but the European Brands Association has over 2,500 members behind this. And it is also now being funded in part by the Alliance to End Plastic Waste. And basically it is testing this at scale. And so these brands that are participating have produced packaging that have been sent through, right now, preliminary trials at a MRF. And then stage 3 is to send it, actually get these products on the shelves, consumers using them, and that packaging moved with other non-watermarked material through a MRF. And so that would be the true, like, full scale assessment. But the indications from this kind of phase 2 assessment, which we've wrapped up, have been very, very promising. So the European Commission and Parliament are already beginning to consider how they integrate digital watermarking into packaging to help create kind of this evolutionary leap in recovery. So proposed digital watermarking will be a component of packaging by 2030. This hasn't been finalized, but it's something that's being considered at this moment. They're recognizing that digital watermarking very much can support the circular economy goals and aggressive collection and recovery goals that have been set by the European Commission, and it will help the established PROs and EPR programs that are already operating in Europe that are in need of data to really manage those programs efficiently. So that's where Holy Grail stands, and from a high level perspective. But as I said, we just wrapped up this phase 2 research, and these are the results that we're seeing aggregated. So very high rates of detection for both rigid and flexible packaging. Ejection, obviously, detection is one thing, successful ejection is another, and that can, vary dependent on shape, form, what's next to the item, things like that. But overall, when you're looking at the purity of things that come out, we're seeing in the success rates in the 90s, sometimes even, almost 100%. So we're very confident that this type of smart labeling is proving out in Europe, and will continue to prove out as we move to phase 3. So hopefully some potential likelihood in terms of wide scale adoption in Europe. And many of the brands, I would say, I don't know if you guys took a look at that list, but many of those brands participating are global brands that also operate here in the US. So this is not going to be a stretch for them to adapt to using digital watermarks here as well. So that's where digital watermarking is at with packaging and enabling recycling. But I want to impart that that smart labels have broad utility. And really some of the uses being considered are, they're amazing. And so just to kind of enforce that consumers will be used to engaging in this Internet of Things, I think within the next 2 years. But it goes back to, basically there's been precedents for using smart labels set by the federal government as early as 2016. And that was when they began to define the regulation around GMO labeling. So Digimarc worked extensively with the USDA and worked with them to validate that not only was conveying information through digital link met all of the accessibility requirements, but then they took the step of codifying it in the Federal Registry. So there is a report here that was done by Deloitte back in 2016 that demonstrated there was a sufficient number of consumers that had access to smartphones that could utilize the digital links to obtain the necessary information around GMO labeling. So that was kind of the green light for saying, yep, this is an acceptable labeling method. And then they also recognized there that, so they added the language around electronic or digital link. And so this is key too, right? Like when we're looking at innovation, we don't want to say kind of which innovation must be used, because this is an emerging and evolving space. And so by using broad language that says information can be conveyed through an electronic or digital link, that simply opens up the door for innovation. It doesn't require it. It doesn't say what type of technology or platform must be used, just recognizing that the world of labeling is likely changing. And we want to make sure that we account for that and allow for that in regulation, particularly so we don't have to go back and make changes to update things. So just some mentions here, uses beyond consumer packaging. So the textile industry is really waking up to the opportunity of reuse, they are realizing that smart labeling will be key to enabling that. So this is an example here, Houdini Sportswear. So Eon is a platform that a number of textile companies are using, and you can link to that and see all of them, to embed, in this case, there's an RFID tag in the zipper. It's an outerwear company, and they reference down here, you know, their motivation is just an enhanced consumer experience. But what we're finding with smart labels and textiles is it also enables reuse economy, because it tells you exactly when the garment was produced, what batch, what the initial value was, and it helps the companies engaging in reuse to really maximize value out of it. In terms of durable goods, there's the potential for, specifically in the IKEA program, I don't know if you guys are aware that IKEA is now like buying back some of the used furniture and reselling it. They're looking at the potential for using tags on furniture. So if it has to be refurbished, God forbid if it has to be reassembled, you want to access that information. So by having a label, a consumer or an employee can access all of that very quickly. And again, maximize value in a second use. Another really, really interesting application is using digital watermarking in sports jerseys. There are a couple of soccer clubs looking at how to embed a code in the jersey of a player. And again, these are all customizable. So each player kind of has their own code on their jersey. And a fan could stick up a smartphone and get the stats, bio, like it's just another way to begin to engage at a sports arena. And then it's also being looked at for inclusion in apparel care labels. So people understand how to care for their product. If there is like a reuse buyback, what to do with it at the time you want to discard it. And then it will also tell those in the textile recycling industry what that is made of. And that can be included not just as a label, like you're used to seeing, it can be embedded in a logo, or other type of patch, or you know, somewhere discreetly on the garment itself. So, you know, this is really how the industry is looking at making everyday products around us part of the Internet of Things. So as we talked about kind of the use curve of consumers, I think really we are just beginning to wake up to the fact that brands are looking at this. Brands might be more ahead of us than the consumers are in terms of engagement. But I think the consumers will quickly get up to speed as this becomes more common and utilitarian in our interactions with products. Whoops, I clicked on the link. There, is that back for you guys?
We didn't lose
Oh,
you,
it
so
didn't.
you're still
Okay,
there,
sorry.
yeah.
I clicked on the Eon link. I went to the Eon webpage. All right, let me advance. Oh gosh, it keeps advancing my slides to the Eon.
Maybe if you hover over the little
There it
triangle
is.
there you go.
Okay. So I believe this is the last slide here. So, you know, the potential of smart labeling approaches and regulation, as I mentioned. So in some of the work that I've been doing with Digimark, and we're looking specifically at labeling requirements as they're introduced either as part of an EPR package or separately, we're really advocating for just very general language that creates the space for innovation. And so I offer some example of you know, different language here that accomplishes that. And so we're working with different states to kind of move them all in the same direction, and people are generally responsive. So that's kind of like the legislative or regulatory ask. I think that the entire smart labeling industry would ask for. And just the general you know, need to recognize that smartphones are already kind of the remote control of our lives and will only continue to be so. So when there are questions of, you know, access, if it's been determined we have sufficient access already, that's only going to increase. And then already proven similar labeling initiatives using linkage from package include that smart label initiative under CBA that has really an extraordinary number of brands and products already participating in that precedent set in the federal registry for the GMO labeling and what's being proven out in the Holy Grail 2.0 initiative. So, I think with looking back at where we've been, looking back at the future uses, smart labeling is really an opportunity for the future. And if we can kind of harness that power appropriately, we can hopefully use it to also enable the circular economy. So I believe that's all I have. Oh, and I am putting together an appendix here, and I can build that out for you guys based on whatever additional information you need, but just some additional information about Digimarc specifically, as they are an Oregon-based company, which is also kind of fun fact that we have this innovation right here, born out of Oregon. So.
Indeed. Well, thank you, Kim, and thank you. That coat seemed very Oregon. Like it would keep you dry in this type of weather. I thought it was really, really great. So thanks. So I guess my first question is connected to following. Thank you for that terrific presentation. My first question is kind of connected to that whole level of adoption, and that piece. I too think the cell phone is a remote. I've figured out how to turn off the TV in the other room, which is a neat trick. But I'm curious to see if like what level of adoption smart labeling or QR codes or together, so that digital watermarking and QR codes have in the CPG space, so the consumer packaged goods space.
So I think it's growing, and sometimes COVID blessings are, kind of strange. Yeah. But how many of us went to a restaurant and used the QR code for our menu, yeah. Right? Like, we're beginning to get more accustomed to using QR codes. And I would just say personally, like, since that experience in the restaurant, I've developed a survey for a client, and I'm like, let's put the QR code on our business cards, right? If we want to quickly direct people to feedback. We're doing a little Earth Day event here in Scappoose, and we got a scavenger hunt, and I'm like, get the QR code so people can fill out the form. So I think we're all becoming increasingly aware of the power of these types of labels and the utility of them. So, and I think too, once Holy Grail is able to more broadly advertise some of the findings of their research, that, brands, well, it's always kind of a chicken or an egg, right? So the brands are wanting to do it because they understand that they can convey a lot of information, but there hasn't been that broad adoption. When there is that broad adoption, I think consumers will understand that they can engage with their packaging. We just have to kind of make them aware of that.
I checked in at the DMV today using a QR code, so I can definitely say that as well. So, but you don't have a specific number, so that's something we can follow up on in terms of percentage of, and I know that's a challenging number to get, but that's it.
And I would say if there's anyone who has it, it's probably the Consumer Brands Association, since they're running that smart label platform.
Great suggestion to reach out to them. Can decorative embossing work on other materials or just on plastics materials? So meaning the embossing, so like the embedded in the package itself, as opposed to, on print.
Mm-hmm. I would imagine it could be. So yes, and I think there is experimentation happening with other substrates, but other materials like aluminum have a lot of printing, right?
Oh no, for sure.
Printing is the easiest way to begin to apply these smart labels. I think it doesn't require a mold change or anything that's a little bit more complicated than that, or lasering. It can also be accomplished through lasering, but that takes a lot of time. So where it can be accomplished through print, I think that's ideal, but it can be applied to other substrates.
That's great. I have one more question, then I'll kick it to Dr. Brandon. So regarding the Holy Grail, the Holy Grail 2.0, that piece, I was thinking about the MRF level. Is curious if you have any idea of as this testing is happening, what the cost of the sortation devices using the technology are, and I think of the range of, you have the robotics on the sort of less expensive side of things on sortation, and the NIR sorts are usually a little bit higher depending on how large or how wide they are. Curious what the cost for these, the sorters for this type of material would be.
Yeah, so that is going to be technology specific. That's up to the technology manufacturers. But here's how the units are being developed for Holy Grail. So they're currently working with Polink and Tamra, which are the leading sortation technologies over in Europe. And so by working with the two of them, they've been able to demonstrate that all the sortation technology manufacturers should be able to develop a detection unit. The idea initially is to develop detection units that can be added in front of the NIR sorter and tied to the computer of the near infrared unit and tied into the ejection units, so that there is compatibility with the existing NIR technology. Polink and Tomra are already planning their next generation of units. Will have the option to include digital watermarking detection as well as a function. And so there are other technologies that have expressed interest in beginning to look at developing units as well. So the idea would be this detection unit is less than a whole new sorting unit. And then, when you're ready to invest in a sorting unit, it's an optional add-on.
Terrific, thank you. Dr. Brandon?
Yeah, thank you so much, Kim. This has been wonderful. One question, thinking about kind of the second part of our charge as a task force, thinking about issues affecting accessibility. You kind of spoke to how these smart labels can really enable access through language access, even disability access, which is really, really remarkable. I was wondering if you or Dylan perhaps know how many people have access to smartphones and could take advantage of this technology. Like, is this something that would be accessible if we did end up using this type of technology?
We can certainly go back to that Deloitte study, which was funded in part by the USDA, if not in whole, but that was 2016. And so I'm not sure, we could assume that the rates only go up from 2016, not down. But I think for the charge of this group, it would be important to understand smartphone access for Oregon. And I don't know what the best way would be to attain that information.
It's a great question. I do have some research that from the Pew Research Center in 2021 that's found that more than 85% of Americans now own a smartphone. So and that's not a cell phone, that's a smartphone. So that I think is useful, but I think we could drill down and get some more information on Oregon specific. So good question. So I guess I had one more follow up, and then Alex, I'll kick it to you. That type of accessibility, obviously language, assuming it also could kind of connect on visible size. I'm thinking about that. One of the challenges that we've kind of come to that has been brought up in a couple of meetings is how big the font is, or how big the various pieces are. I wonder if you could maybe speak to that, both on the on-pack label, but also for what is delivered via the cell phone. Through a QR code or an integrated smart label.
So you're talking about the physical size of the package to make sure it's compatible with the system?
The physical, the graphic itself, so you can see it. Yes, and then how it's delivered, how the information is delivered to the consumer using their phone.
Yeah. So if it's a QR code, there's probably a standard size print. Probably, I would say, no different than, well, I don't know, some how to recycle labels are pretty small. It would probably be comparable to a barcode, right? The existing barcode that's on there. And then if you went with kind of a technology that had a replicating package, like a digital watermark, it would be all over the package. If it's a QR code, most phones, have that native. You open up your camera. It allows you to click it and it sends you to a website for information. For a platform that's not yet native to a smartphone, you would simply need to download an app. Digimarc has an app. I would imagine if the state of Oregon is using this, as a, messaging around recyclability, maybe there would be an Oregon recycling app that could read the label and give that specific information to the consumer. So might be a no step or two-step process for the consumer.
Thank you. Alex, do you have any questions for Kim?
She keeps answering them as I think
I know,
of
me
them,
too.
so thank you, Kim. This has been great. It's been very helpful to hear more information about this. I guess to Holy Grail, because that's the place where it's mainly being tested currently. That was mainly focused on sortation. Is that correct?
So there are a bunch of different work packages as part of Holy Grail. So yes, sortation, they wanted to demonstrate the technical viability of detection in the MRF. And so that's kind of what this phase 2 is focused on, but there is a whole work group package that's focused on consumer engagement. And there's also a whole work group package that's focused on economic feasibility and, breaking down the cost to the recyclers, or the MRFs, the cost to the brand owners, and integrating it. So all of that information will be made available. I think the time scale on that might be a year out from those pieces.
Thank you. That would be great. I can't wait to see that. And then just really quick to make sure that I understand this, you could take technically like a how to recycle label and embed this technology into that existing label so that you look at it, you see the information, but you can also scan it with your phone. So, if it did say check locally, you could scan it and that information could be brought up for you locally. You're checking it. It's very simple, where you don't have to go to a website or something like that. Is that correct?
Yeah. And so absent of a universal recycling list, that would need to interface with a comprehensive database of what's available based on community, right? And then your phone can say what community you're in and tie to that. But for a universal recycling list, like we're trying to establish here in the state, anyone in the state reasonably is able to draw upon the same information, right? So we might not even need this like really comprehensive database of, what's available in Hillsborough versus where I'm out in Scappoose or someone out in Tigard. We could, your phone could simply say, I'm in Oregon, or I'm using my Oregon app, and scan it, sends you to, the website that says, yep, recyclable, not recyclable, and makes that determination for you. Or actually the package will make that determination for you. It's intelligent packaging, right? And that's like the other thing that kind of flips smart labeling with the system is we're no longer relying on detection units to try to like make the determination of what things are. We're flipping that, and the packages can start telling us what they are and what they need to do. So it kind of changes that paradigm.
That's great. As the hail starts coming down outside, everybody's looking outside. I don't know if it's gotten to you at Scappoose yet, Kim. Or
Not
maybe
yet.
it
I still have some
earlier.
sunshine, but now I know it's coming.
All right. Are there other questions, Alex or Dr. Brandon? No? Okay, terrific. Well, Kim, I thank you very much for your time. We'll have time again at 2 p.m. on April 20th. To be able to have all three of our panelists that had these or in these recordings to be able to ask direct questions to you from the rest of the task force. And I can't thank you enough for the time you've given us today, Kim. Thank you and your expertise.
I appreciate it. And I really appreciate many of the task force members identifying this as a line of inquiry. I think it's an important one. So thanks.
Terrific.